would permit the payment of civilian personnel and contractors whom the Secretary determines are providing support to the members of our armed services. And, Mr. Speaker, I will retain the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Georgia reserves his time. The gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I'll yield myself such time as I may require to address this bill in general.
The gentleman is recognized for as much time as he wishes to consume.
Mr. Speaker, this bill is an act of political theater. It attempts to cover up the underlying problem of a government shutdown with what in essence is a rhetorical gimmick. The bill claims to support our troops, which the majority knows that the minority party wants to do at least as much as they do. There's no disagreement in terms of the desire to make sure that all of our noble men and women in uniform and the civilians who work for the Defense Department and the contractors that contribute to our national security are all paid. We all want to do that. So why do we have this bill? Well, this bill attempts to reassure the public who might be confused as to what the adverse impacts of a government shutdown might be. Mr. Speaker, it's important that the public understand that even with this bill, what we will do tonight, what the majority will do tonight, will nevertheless fail to provide the materials essential to support and maintain the readiness of our U.S. forces. I'll list any number of activities that will, notwithstanding this bill, go unfunded if the government is shut down. And because of the action that the majority will take tonight, it looks increasingly likely that that will happen at the beginning of next week. Mr. Speaker, when we finish tonight, we will set in motion a situation where military medical treatment facilities will have to scale back operations. They'll try not to impact inpatient care or acute and emergency outpatient care, but routine medical and dental procedures, elective surgery is likely to be stopped. Most maintenance activities would stop. Military members would continue to receive private sector care under TRICARE, but medical provider bills are going to go unpaid until appropriations are enacted. New contracts, including contract renewals and extensions and the issuance of task orders, those are not likely to be executed. Any new contract will not be paid until appropriations are enacted. Death benefits to members of families of the military killed in the line of duty are not likely to be paid until appropriations are enacted. In other words, won't be if the government is shut down. Almost all travel for temporary duty and some permanent change of station moves would be delayed, canceled, or cut short. Many professional training and education activities would be stopped. The bill fails to fund the material support needed to conduct training and ensure the readiness of our forces at home. Regular training exercises, including large-scale training rotations that are absolutely essential, they depend on equipment that is in proper working order, facilities that have been properly maintained, and the supplies needed to support soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. The bill fails to fund the procurement and research accounts that maintain the technological advantage of U.S. forces. It fails to fund the ships, the aircraft, ground equipment, sensors, ammunition that our troops rely upon in combat. My friend from Georgia knows that about 40% of the DoD appropriations bill goes to acquire and enhance this equipment. Failure to fund these accounts hurts the readiness of U.S. forces and degrades our defense industrial base. Now let me mention some of the other activities that will not be exempted, notwithstanding the fact that this bill will be passed virtually overwhelmingly. The Department of Veterans Affairs personnel charged with claims processing for veterans, including those returning from the last 12 years of combat, will not be paid. This legislation will nullify the progress that has been made by the VA on reducing the unacceptably high claims backlog. A shutdown cuts foreign military financing to Israel, a vital partner and ally that depends upon $3.1 billion being provided at the beginning of the fiscal year. And thus it undermines our national security in an ever-changing and unstable region by degrading Israel's ability to maintain a qualitative military advantage. These cuts will also have a direct impact on the industrial base throughout the United States, costing countless jobs that are funded through Israel's purchase of goods and services. Additionally, a shutdown will have a direct impact on our counterterrorism efforts. It will halt programs that combat transnational crime, terrorism, and proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. This could severely impact activities supporting our homeland security. It will stop counter-drug, anti-crime, and border security efforts in Mexico and Central America that secure our own borders, as well as programs that advance democracy, including civil society and the rule of law. When the government shuts down, overseas operations are heavily affected. It would put at risk the physical protection for diplomatic personnel and facilities overseas and severely limit the ability of the State Department to provide for and maintain missions in increasingly dangerous locations. With all the rhetoric about Benghazi, and we share the concern over what happened, this again puts people at risk overseas. It would stop commercial export sales. Shutdown will force the State Department to impose indiscriminate cuts to embassy security and protection of personnel, thereby eroding security of the United States government diplomatic facilities and making it all but impossible to meet the requirements to provide safe and secure embassies overseas. All national parks would be closed, memorials and museums. There are 401 of these locations throughout the country. Cumberland Island National Seashore would be closed. Martin Luther King National Historic Site would be closed. Chattahoochee, the Chattahoochee River National Recreational Area would be closed. Fort Frederica National Monument on St. Simons Island would be closed. Cumberland Island National Seashore would be closed. And that's just to mention a few federal facilities that I suspect the gentleman managing this bill is fully familiar with. We'll let go 4,000 weather forecasters. We can go on and on. The Smithsonian will be closed. The Lincoln Memorial will be shut down. The National Zoo. You know, Yellowstone. What are we doing this for? This doesn't make sense. All the wildlife refuges will be closed for hunting. This is hunting season. You know, this may not seem like a big deal, but I think the American people, when this is done, are going to realize the same thing they did back in 1995. Wait a minute. We want these federal activities. We need these federal facilities. We need these jobs. Open up our government. And any Congress that acts to close it down is disserving the American public. We are not fulfilling our responsibilities if we allow this government to shut down. But that's exactly what we are doing with the action that the majority will be taking tonight. I'll reserve my balance, about the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Virginia reserves. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I can't imagine why Harry Reid and the Senate would shut down all these things for a health care bill called Obamacare, which is raising the cost of medicine and decreasing the access to it. I yield a minute and a half to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Wolf.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for a minute and a half.
I thank the chair. Mr. Speaker, the government should stay open. I support the legislation, but it can be improved. All employees who work without pay should be paid on time, including, for example, the CIA. I went to the memorial service where the CIA employees were killed in Khost, and they're side by side with their American military. The FBI, who is on the scene at Kenya now, investigating al-Shabaab and the attack. DEA, Customs and Border Patrol, prison guards, doctors and nurses at VA hospitals, air traffic controllers, and federal firefighters, many who gave their lives who fighting wildfires around the country. Otherwise, they would be working without pay if the government is closed. I believe that all federal employees should be paid. We should not forget that several federal employees were killed at the Navy Yard. I went to the memorial service and saw the pain of their families, and the CNO who spoke said they were supporting the fleet. So in closing, I am going to support this amendment, but federal employees and their families should not be punished because the administration and the Congress cannot agree. And yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Virginia yields back. Gentleman from Georgia reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I want to associate myself with the comments of my good friend from Virginia, Mr. Wolf. I completely agree with him that we want both DOD personnel and the personnel of our other federal agencies to be able to continue to come to work. And I appreciate his comments. Mr. Speaker, at this time, I'd like to yield 4 minutes to the very distinguished minority leader of the minority whip of the Congress, Mr. Hoyer, who not only has substantial military activity within his district, but very ably represents tens of thousands of federal employees. I yield 4 minutes to Mr. Hoyer.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 4 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my friend Mr. Moran for yielding. For 33 years, the gentleman from Virginia who just spoke and I have sought equity and fairness for our federal employees, whether they be in uniform or in civilian clothes. I refer to this bill as selective responsibility. They know that the shutdown of government is irresponsible, and they know that the President nor the Senate are going to agree, as they have not over and over and over again, to the proposal they have made. And so, because they know that they don't want to be so irresponsible that the men and women who defend our country would be put at risk. And I might say I believe every one of us in this House is going to vote for this bill. But my friend from Virginia, Mr. Wolf, who is my good friend and with whom I have worked side by side in a bipartisan way, effectively for many, many interests, he's right. Now let me say that on the 16th of September, 10 people were struck down working for the defense of this country. Now, I understand you will say, oh, your bill covers them. I've attended 2 funerals, one on Wednesday and one today, spoken at both. With Mr. Wolf, I went to the Marine Barracks this past Sunday. The Commander-in-Chief, President Obama, spoke. Secretary Hagel, Secretary of the Department of Defense, spoke. Secretary Mabus, the Secretary of the Navy, spoke. CNO Admiral Greenert spoke. And NAVSEA Commander, which is located, of course, at the Navy Yard, Vice Admiral Hill O'Reilly spoke. They spoke about one Navy, uniformed, civilian, working as a team. But they spoke more broadly than that, in that all federal employees are one team, joined together to make our government work as effectively as it can. We are the board of directors of that government. And I can't believe there's one of us, Mr. Speaker, that would serve on a board of directors and treat a large portion of our employees with such disrespect, with such lack of consideration, with such contempt at times, as we treat our civilian employees. This bill does not cover the FBI. It doesn't cover CIA. Now, you will argue, oh, well, they're in the defense and they'll be critical employees, but only some. It doesn't cover the National Institute of Health to try to make America a healthier nation. You want to defund Obamacare, you want to defund NIH. Now, you'll say, of course not, Mr. Hoyer. This isn't a shutdown of government. It's a continuing resolution. Well, we know it has some poison pills in. We know the Senate won't buy it. We know the time is running out, but we're going to do it anyway. It'll affect if this bill won't help the Food and Drug Administration. It won't help the Centers for Disease Control. It won't help Homeland Security, except in certain narrow instances. Can I have one additional minute?
Yield the gentleman an additional 2 minutes.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized for 2 minutes.
It won't affect the Border Patrol. It won't affect the FAA, except in certain limited instances. What do you think the morale of the people who work for us, the Board of Directors, is at this point in time? I will tell you, it's on the floor. That's not good for our country. This is selective responsibility. Responsibility would be, let's fund government and then let's debate these issues. We have debated these issues. And by the way, we won the debate in the election, not on this floor, in the election. But you refused to accept the results of the election. We're all going to vote for this bill. But I will tell my friends on both sides of the aisle, it is time for us to give respect to our non-uniformed federal personnel, because they are critical to the success of this country, to the success of our people. And we can argue about how large or how small our government is, but we should not argue about the quality of people that we want in the government. We should not argue about the fact that we want their morale to be high because they feel respected, because they feel wanted and worthwhile, and that the missions that they perform in whatever their role is appreciated as important for the American people. Any corporate head that you talk of and talk to and talk about will tell you you want to make sure your people understand that you believe in their worth. Because if you do not, you will not get what you want. We will all support this bill, but it is selective responsibility and will not excuse your rampant irresponsibility. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Maryland yields back. The gentleman from Virginia reserves. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield I yield 2 minutes to the chairman of the Army Caucus, Mr. Judge John Carter from Texas.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, this rhetoric's wonderful and I'm enjoying it, but I represent Fort Hood, Texas. Fort Hood has put more human beings in the fight in the last 10 or 11 years than any place on earth. Not only soldiers go to war, but wives or husbands or spouses and children stay home. And they have the same human problems that every one of us have. I would venture to bet that every member of this Congress, when they're away from their spouse, at some time has a conversation with their spouse to find out that the water heater went out, or the air conditioner isn't working, or the kids got a problem in school, or there's some other thing. And you know, it weighs on us even when we have this job in this beautiful, beautiful chamber. But think about the soldier on the line in Afghanistan. With every waking and sleeping minute he's there, someone is trying to take his life. And yet they talk now freely with their families back home. And that same way down on them is magnified 1,000 times. This bill tonight is about human beings, the fighting warriors of the United States of America, and their families. And this bill tries to make sure that in the outside chance that we reasonable people, quote unquote, in this chamber and the other chamber, can come to a compromise to keep this government going, that if in the outside chance that nobody wants that this government shuts down for whatever period of time, that the fighting men and women of this nation and their families at home will have a paycheck. I think that this is such a small token to put before people who risk their lives. It would be almost a shame to debate any other way. I move that we pass this bill, and I hope, as my colleague said, 100% of us vote for it.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Georgia reserves. Gentleman from Virginia.
Does my friend from Georgia have many other speakers?
Mr. Speaker, how much time do we have left?
The gentleman from Georgia has 14.5 minutes, and the gentleman from Virginia has 4.5 minutes.
It seems to me you may want to have some of your speakers speak at this point, Mr. Kingston.
With that, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Whitman.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the gentleman from Georgia for yielding, and I have come to the floor many times this year to remind my colleagues that our nation has no greater asset than the folks serving our nation, including those who make up our Department of Defense, both military and civilian alike. And today I'm glad to support this bill, and I'm pleased to see the House is moving to ensure that our service members and civilian Department of Defense employees and contractors will be paid. But we must also not forget all of the other federal employees who serve our nation on a daily basis. They do a fantastic job also. And I'm proud to represent tens of thousands of federal employees and retirees who live in the 1st District of Virginia. These hardworking patriots serve our nation on a daily basis, whether it be keeping our skies safe for travelers with the FAA, or supporting our troops on the front lines on the war on terror through the FBI and CIA, or the nurses and doctors in our veterans' hospitals. I firmly believe that the government must continue to operate to ensure our service members and all of our federal employees continue to be paid, and the government operations that folks count on each and every day are not interrupted. The American public and the nation's public service deserve our extraordinary efforts to make sure this happens. They deserve the best. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman from Virginia yields back. Gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to Mr. Scott, the representative of the Warner Robins Air Force Base and a member of the Armed Services Committee. 2 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague from Georgia for his leadership on this bill. And you, Mr. Speaker, the House is at work, the Senate's at home, the President's absent again. But none of us would be debating the future of this country without the men and women in the United States military. That's what makes theirs special and different. Now, I listened as some argued against this bill and then said we would all support this bill. Good. Good. Then let's put 435 green lights on the board and let's show the country that we're united in this. Just today, 300 men and women from Moody Air Force Base, which my colleague represents, as well as I do, many of the families down there in Georgia, said goodbye to their families and friends and got on a plane. Why? Because we asked them to. Over 90 days ago, this House, right here, passed an appropriations bill that fulfilled our promise to pay our soldiers in a timely manner and did all of the things that you said needed to be done with research and equipment and the other things. This House did that, and the Senate chose not to take action. And because of the Senate's inaction on the bill, the House is again working to do the right thing, while again the Senate is at home, and we are working to pay our men and women who are defending our freedom. Now, I know many of my colleagues, it sounds like maybe all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle are going to support the legislation in this House. And all we're asking is for the Senate and Senator Harry Reid and the President to have enough honor to make sure the families of our soldiers are not used as political leverage and guarantee that they are paid on time, and this amendment does just that. Mr. Speaker, I yield the remainder of my time.
The gentleman from Georgia yields back. The other gentleman from Georgia reserves. Gentleman from Virginia.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to yield a minute to this distinguished gentleman from California who has real-life practical experience in knowing what it's like to administer in an agency, in this case the Interior Department, during a shutdown. Mr. Garamendi.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, 18 years and 3 days ago, I was Deputy Secretary at the United States Department of Interior. It was a vibrant place. The attorneys were doing their work. The accountants were busy. The national parks were open and the rangers were at the gates. They were explaining the great wonders of this land. The Fish and Wildlife Service were caring for those creatures that we care so much about. The researchers at the U.S. Geological Service were doing their things, and then Congress failed to pass an appropriation bill. The next day it was silent. The entire building was empty. The rangers shut the doors to the national parks. The research ceased. To this day, I don't believe there's a person in this room or in this Capitol that can remember what the fight was about, but America can remember the shutdown of the government. And here today, we're in it once again. And the question that the American people will ask, what is this all about? And the end result of it is that the status of this House will diminish once more. If I might, Mr.
I'll yield the gentleman another minute.
The gentleman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The one result of all this will be a further diminution in the status of the Congress. There's a way to resolve this, but it's not to resolve it by delaying for 1 year all of the good that is in the Affordable Health Care Act, all of the insurance reform, and I was the insurance commissioner, and I can tell you how important it is that the insurance reform is there. All of the Medicaid programs and the millions of Americans that have the opportunity. All of those children that are now being covered. For what? For the 42nd, 43rd time, another failed effort, instead of sitting down and working to solve a problem. It's a tragedy that we're about to go through this process. For what? So that some of the wealthiest, most profitable business in America can have a $30 billion tax reduction? I suppose that's important. So that you can say once again the Affordable Health Care Act, Obamacare, is wrong. I remember the days when the nation shut down its government. It was bad. I yield back my time.
Gentleman from California yields back. Gentleman from Virginia reserves. Gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Speaker, I yield my time, myself as much time as I may consume, just to clarify one thing. That,
gentleman's recognized.
Under the current president, the national debt now is 100% of the GDP. For every dollar we spend, 42 cents is borrowed. And that's bad enough, but now the president offers no reform to bend the spending curve whatsoever. Instead, he pushes forward a failed health care policy that has a price tag of $1.7 trillion. It does not decrease the cost of medicine, and it does not increase the access to medicine, which were the two primary objectives, which we heard over and over again by the other party. That's why we're here tonight. This is 1/6 of the economy. And yet we hear the same dogma over and over again. That's why this debate has taken place. We have passed a continuing resolution to keep the government funded so that these civilian employees and all the other government employees that we hear so much about can continue to receive their paychecks. But Harry Reid and the Senate does not want to keep the government open because they're insisting on supporting a $1.7 trillion addition to the national debt, a health care policy which increases the cost of medicine and decreases the access. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to Mr. Perry of Pennsylvania, who is an active duty member of the United States Army and has the rank of a colonel.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding me time. We're talking this evening about a continuing resolution, continuing to fund our government. And I find it odd that, the other side is complaining about our plan, yet their plan is pass it clean. That's the Senate and the President, pass it clean. I'm not going to negotiate. Pass it clean. We're $17 trillion in debt, spending $1 trillion more on the average in the last 4.5, 5 years than we take in. And so the answer is just continue. That's a plan. So we've offered a plan, and we get it that you don't like it. We don't like your plan, but we're here trying to compromise. And part of this amendment is part of that compromise, yet you say, work with us to make Obamacare better, Mr. Speaker. Work with us. But yet on this, you want to complain, and we're saying, work with us to make the CR better. Make sure our troops in contact, kinetic activity, are paid. Make sure that we take care of the one thing in the Constitution, the one thing that says provide, because words mean things, Mr. Speaker. Provide for the common defense. Provide. The other phrase is promote. So we're here to make and set priorities. And so we're saying, as the House of Representatives, paying our military is a priority, as it should be. Mr. Speaker, I have embarked with those soldiers, men and women overseas, watched them leave their families, watched them leave their babies behind. I've watched them. Theirs, as we say, is not to question why. Theirs is to do and die. Please work with us. Please do not argue. Please join us and pass this amendment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Georgia reserves. Gentleman from Virginia.
Mr. Speaker, may I inquire how much time we have left?
The gentleman from Georgia has 8 minutes.
And the gentleman from Virginia?
Has 2.5 minutes. Gentleman from Virginia.
Would the gentleman from Virginia?
With that, Mr. Speaker, is recognized.
I yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, a co-author of this legislation for many years, Mr. Gohmert.
The gentleman from Virginia reserves. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is an important bill, and I appreciate so much my friend who knows about serving the military, Mike Kaufman, getting this to the floor. My friend and I, Jack Kingston, had pushed this over 2.5 years ago, and when it became clear that both parties were going to use our military to get people to vote for a CR they might not otherwise have voted for. We had, I think, over 200 co-sponsors on our bill, but as far as the discharge petition that would have forced it to the bill, we wanted to sign on, but they didn't want to go against our leadership. And so I'm very grateful this bill is on the floor now. I'm very grateful, and I appreciate the Speaker for letting it come forward, because there's one thing the military doesn't need, and that is to be in harm's way and have to worry about whether their loved ones are going to get the check that will allow them to pay their rent or for their car, or is it going to get repossessed. And from my 4 years in the military at Fort Benning, I'm told it hadn't changed much from this standpoint, that people live from month to month, and they don't get paid all that much. So this was critical to get this done. So I'm glad the bill's coming. I'm glad to hear our colleagues on the other side of the aisle are going to vote with us, it sounds like. And as far as the effort to have civilians paid that work for the Department of Defense. I would hope that my colleagues across the aisle saved a little bit of righteous indignation for the Democrats at the other end of the hall. They have had the Department of Defense appropriation bill for months. They've been sitting on it. It would get everybody paid. It would take care of all those things we've been hearing our military is not going to be able to do because we're not passing the bill. So we need to get the Senate to pass the DOD bill, and that'll take care of that, civilians and everybody. Now, we passed the Department of Defense bill, we passed the Energy and Water bill, we passed the Department of Homeland Security. They hadn't taken up anything. We passed the Veterans bill. They hadn't taken up any of those. They've been sitting around talking about how the Republicans are out of control at the end of the hall. And yet, we have Democrats in this town that say, we'll be flexible with Putin, we'll be flexible and sit down and talk with Iran, even though they want to destroy our way of life. But oh no, the Republicans won't talk with them. I know we share a love for America and wanting to do the right thing. But for heaven's sake, have as much flexibility with the Republicans as you do with the Russians and Iranians. That shouldn't be too much to ask. George Washington had a prayer. He prayed we would never forget those who serve in the field, and I'm glad this bill will remember them.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Georgia reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this time, I'll yield 1 minute to the very distinguished gentlelady from New York, the ranking member of the Full Appropriations Committee, Ms. Lowy.
The gentlelady from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, it is 48 hours, 30 minutes before the Republicans plan to shut down this government. Of course there will be bipartisan support for this bill. However, this bill to continue funding the military is a farce. The bill claims to support the troops, but fails to provide the materials essential to support forces and maintain the readiness of our deployed forces. In FY 2014, the administration requested funds for operation and maintenance and procurement accounts that provide supplies, maintenance, ammunition, equipment needed for the troops. The bill by the majority to fund the troops would not provide this material to support the troops. So again, I say to my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, aren't we embarrassed to be part of this dysfunctional Congress with all the work that has been done, that must be done in our districts back home? We should begin to work together, not just say it's inevitable that we're going to close the government down. Let's do it, we can do it, and do it now.
The gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from Virginia reserves. The gentleman from Virginia has 1.5 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized, and the gentleman from Georgia has 5 minutes remaining.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself 1.5 minutes. The
gentleman's recognized for 1.5 minutes.
And I just want to remind everybody, we're here not because of the House Republican Appropriations Committee, but because of the Senate Democrat Appropriations Committee, which to date has not passed one single bill. We've passed the defense bill, we've passed Homeland Security, we've passed military construction. What has Harry Reid and the Democrat, the members of your party, done? Zero. Not one bill. What did they do last year? Well, we passed 7 appropriation bills. What did Harry Reid and the Democrats do in the Senate? They passed 1. That's why we're here debating a continuing resolution. It is not our desire to be here on this. We would rather have regular order. Indeed, we have worked hard for regular order. But, Mr. Speaker, I have the honor of representing Moody Air Force Base, the Townsend Bombing Range, the 224 Signal Range in our Signal Group in Brunswick, Georgia, the 165th Air Wing in Savannah, Georgia, the Combat Readiness Training Center in Savannah, Georgia, Fort Stewart in Hinesville, Georgia, Hunter Army Airfield in Savannah, Georgia, Kings Bay Naval Base in St. Mary's, Georgia, members of the 48th Brigade all over my district. I have Marines. I have 3 Coast Guard stations. On their behalf, we cannot let their pay be interrupted. The things that these fighting men and women in uniform are doing for the United States of America should be off the table. That's why we're here in support of this bill. And I reserve the balance.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, since I have only a minute and a half, I think I'll let the gentleman from Georgia yield to further speakers. I do want to engage and ask that the gentleman would yield some time, though, if he has time available, to engage in a little colloquy, but on his time.
Mr. Speaker, how much time do we have?
The gentleman from Georgia has 3.5 minutes.
3.5?
And the gentleman from Virginia has a minute and a half.
Mr. Speaker, I have our last speaker who's going to close for us. Mr. Kaufman is going to consume 3 minutes. So if the gentleman from Virginia wants to talk in 30 seconds, I will accommodate my friend here.
Well, I appreciate it. So the gentleman yields to me?
I yield 30 seconds.
Well, let me ask my very good friend from Georgia.
No, excuse me. I yield till I hear what you're up to.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Let me ask my very good friend from Georgia if he knows why over in the Senate the minority has insisted upon the cloture rule, in other words, filibustering the appropriation rules, and why they have not appointed conferees to the budget conference.
Reclaiming my time, I would only say this. It's hard to figure out what the United States Senate is doing at all under Harry Reid's leadership. But
Mr. Speaker, the House is not in order. We have
House will be in order. The House will be in order. Time has expired. Gentleman from Virginia is recognized.
I'll reserve my time.
Reserved. Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
I reserve the balance of my time to close.
All right. Well, at this point, Mr. Speaker, then, Mr. Speaker, at this point, I'll yield a minute to my good friend from North Carolina, the ranking member on the Homeland Security Appropriations Subcommittee.
Gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman. Mr. Speaker, most of us will vote for this bill, but it's not going to fix the damage to our country of a shutdown. Nor can it mask what's going on here tonight, another chapter of Republican hostage-taking, threatening to shut down the government or refuse to pay the country's bills if they don't get their way politically. It's been pretty confusing tonight, all this talk about who's willing to negotiate. Republicans know very well that it is they who have refused to go to conference with the Senate on the budget, and they also know that it's their leaders who cut off discussions of a comprehensive budget deal with the President back in December. What they're doing tonight's the opposite of negotiation. Take it or leave it politics, threatening government collapse and economic ruin in pursuit of a political agenda they could not advance by legitimate means. We need to get back to the basics, keep the government open, pay the country's bills, and negotiate a real and comprehensive budget plan. I yield back.
Gentleman from North Carolina yields back. The gentleman from Virginia reserves 30 seconds. Gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time because I only have one speaker
Gentleman
left
reserved.
who will
Gentleman
close.
from Virginia is recognized.
All right. So the gentleman is going to close with the remaining speaker, I gather. All right. Then I will yield myself the balance of the time.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the problem with this bill is that it assumes a government shutdown. If it didn't assume a government shutdown, then it wouldn't separate Department of Defense personnel from non-Department of Defense personnel. Why would you need it if we were assuming that we're going to be able to fund the government? That's the underlying problem with this bill. We're going to vote for it because we feel that Department of Defense personnel ought to be paid. Of course we do. Of course we're going to vote for this. But why are you doing it? You're only doing it because you assume that you're going to shut the government down. That's the problem with this bill. There's no other purpose for this bill.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thank you.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, if the Harry Reid Democrat Senate would pass the defense appropriation bill, we would not be here tonight having this debate. With that, I yield the balance of my time to the author of the bill, Mr. Kaufman, a retired Marine, although Marines never retire, excuse me.
The gentleman from Colorado is recognized for 2 3/4 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, as we near the final days of the fiscal year and come face to face with the possibility of a government shutdown, I have introduced this legislation in order to ensure that our military is not used as a political pawn in negotiations between the United States House and the Senate. My legislation, H.R. 3210, the Pay Our Military Act, ensures that until such time as the President signs a continuing resolution, our military and the Department of Defense, civilians and contractors who support our men and women in uniform will continue to be paid regardless of a shutdown. I've had 5 overseas deployments during my military career between the Army and the Marine Corps. I returned from my last assignment with the Marine Corps in Iraq in 2006. I fully understand the stresses that our men and women in uniform face on a day-to-day basis, particularly when we are still a nation at war. Things are very different today than it was when I was a Marine Corps Light Armored Infantry officer during the first Gulf War. We didn't have the internet, so that all of our communications from home were delivered by regular mail that could take weeks to reach us. Back then, you literally checked out when you left your family and checked back in when you came back home. Today, most of our deployed military personnel, whether sailors aboard a ship in the Persian Gulf or soldiers and Marines at a forward operating base in Afghanistan, have some level of access to instant communications with their families. Today, a Marine rifleman can literally be out on a combat patrol, return to his base camp, and then be on the internet communicating with his family in real time. When things don't go well at home, the stress that our deployed men and women are already under is multiplied, particularly if their families go without an income and suffer financial hardships due to a government shutdown. In the event of a government shutdown, we must ensure that the men and women who defend our nation and the armed services and their families will continue to be paid. Mr. Speaker, regardless of what happens in the days ahead, this is a bill that should receive unanimous support. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this legislation and hope that the Senate will act on it before it might be too late. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. All time for debate has expired. Pursuant to House Resolution 366, the previous question is ordered on the bill. The question is an engrossment and third reading of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it. Third reading.
A bill making continuing appropriations for military pay in the event of a government shutdown.
The question is on passage of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Speaker,
the gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
I request the yeas and the nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8, Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Pursuant to Clause 1C of Rule 19, further consideration of the motion offered by the gentleman from Kentucky will resume. The clerk report the motion.
Motion offered by Mr. Rogers of Kentucky.
The question of adoption on the motion is divided between 2 House amendments. The first portion of the divided question is, will the House concur in the Senate amendment with House Amendment Number 1, printed in House Report 113-238? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
You ask for a recorded vote on that, Mr. Speaker. We seek a recorded vote.
Does the gentleman from Virginia ask for the yeas and nays?
I ask for the yeas and nays on that,
The yeas and
Mr.
nays
Speaker.
are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 8 and Clause 9 of Rule 20. This 15-minute vote on the first portion of the divided question will be followed by 5-minute votes on the remaining portion of the divided question, if ordered. Passage of H.R. 3210 and the motion to suspend the rules on H.R. 2848. This is a 15-minute vote.
In 2 days, the fiscal year 2013 will end, Monday, September 30th. The House this evening has been debating continued federal funding past that date, and in particular, 2 amendments to the Senate continuing resolution. One would repeal the health care law's 2.3 medical device tax that went into effect this year, and the other would delay implementation of the 2010 health care law until January 1st, 2015. This first vote is on the medical device tax. That 2.3 medical device tax, again, under the House amendment here, would be repealed. The Senate on Friday passed their continuing resolution by stripping out the health care defunding language that the House had passed a week ago, and also setting the CR's date to November 15th. Well, both of the amendments that the House has proposed here would set that date back to December the 15th. We're opening up our phone lines again to get your thoughts on the debate over the continuing resolution, also the debate you just saw on the military pay that would be paying members of the military in the event of a government shutdown. If you're a Democrat, use 202-585-3885, Republicans 202-585-3886, all others 202-585-3887. We'll also read some tweets. C-SPAN chat is the hashtag, and we've posted a question earlier today on Facebook asking you who's responsible for a potential government shutdown. We'll read some of the results of that. But let's get to your calls first to our Republican line. Bonnie is in Riverton, Wyoming. Bonnie, hello. Go ahead. You're on the air.
I thank you. I thank you for C-SPAN, but I do not understand this because we are America. We are not communist. We are not socialist. Why are they arguing about a health care bill that is going to be a communist health care? I don't understand why our servicemen are not covered no matter what. We owe our lives to those people. 5 generations. I do not understand why this is going on. The Democrats think we're communists, I guess. Thank you, sir.
Clifton, New Jersey. Hello to Jason on our Democrats line. Clifton, New Jersey. Hello.
Although I am a Democrat, I do think the Republicans are seizing a excellent opportunity to take control and power in this situation, because I think if they continue to add amendments to this bill and going into the debt ceiling, if they continue to block implementation of Obamacare, I think if they stay strong and things go out of control, the market crashes and things really spin out of control, I think the Democrats may have no choice but to delay implementation of the health care law, because things can really get ugly at this point, I think.
On Twitter, C-SPAN chat is the hashtag. Ken tweets, if too many people are in fact adversely impacted by a partial government shutdown, that itself is proof the government is too large. Dante says businesses choose to lay off or lessen employees' hours. Insurance companies choose to raise rates to rip off people before the Affordable Care Act greed. And one from Tracy who says, hey, Steny, referring to Steny Hoyer, please, it's not like Barack Obama will let the Border Patrol enforce the immigration laws anyway. She's talking about the funding of Border Patrol agents. Here's Wallington, New Jersey. Mary Lou is on our Independence line. Mary Lou, hello. Mary Lou, is that you?
Thank you for C-SPAN.
You bet.
As far as the government shutdown goes, it is definitely in the lap of the Democrats. And regarding this health care law, for all the people out there that were gullible enough to believe this man in the White House and all of these Democrats and what they have been preaching, which is total lies about what great health care they're going to be getting, the people going on Medicaid, if they're lucky enough to even to be able to find a doctor that will accept Medicaid, It's going to take a long time to be able to see someone. They're not going to get the care they expected, and in many cases, they're not even going to see a doctor. They're going to see physician's assistants. They're going to see nurse practitioners. Their premiums are definitely going to go up. They're going to have co-pays and deductibles they never dreamed about. They would have been better off going to the ER. They would have gotten better care. So the people out there better start watching and listening, because the biggest danger to our country right now is the uninformed electorate that we have that are putting people in like Barack Obama and most of the people in the Democratic Party. It's very, very sad. So wake up. And if it does shut down, it will not be on the shoulders of the Republicans. It will be squarely at the White House, the administration, and every Democrat in that Congress.
We're asking that question on Facebook. Who's responsible for the current fiscal stalemate in Washington? The options: congressional Democrats, congressional Republicans, or the White House. The tally so far: 251 Facebook posts for congressional Democrats, 848 for congressional Republicans, and the White House 469. We say hello to Nick, who's in St. Clair Shores. Nick, go ahead.
This Obamacare is so bad. It's such an... Everybody disapproves of it, just like those other terrible things like Social Security and Medicare. Oh, my God, whoever passed those things. Are you guys really watching this at 11:30 on a Saturday night? Wake up. This country is going downhill fast, and it's those Tea Party people who need to be thrown back in the ocean where they came from. It's sad that anybody's really paying attention to them. And we just spent an hour talking about military and not having military people lose their money.
Right.
What happened last week when they took away $40 billion from food stamps? A lot of that was for military people. Wake up, Republicans. Wake up, Democrats. This country's going bad.
And that military pay bill coming up that's a separate bill. It will come up in a vote in this series of votes. Emma Dumaine of CQ writes that bill, in addition to ensuring that members of the armed services get paid if there's a government shutdown, it would also allow some defense contractors to receive paychecks, but it appears to exclude certain civilian employees of the Defense Department who are not considered essential to supporting uniformed service members. Here's Sierra Vista, Arizona, on our Republican line. Laurie, hello. Laurie, hello. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
Thank you, C-SPAN, for providing the programming. Yeah, we are staying up late at night watching it because it's very important. My husband and I are Republicans, and we've been Republicans for quite a while, but we don't agree with what's going on in Congress at all. The Affordable Care Act is actually going to help quite a lot of people. We've been, as state employees, we've been on the health exchange for over 20 years, and we've always prioritized our health insurance and our health care, and we're all the better for it. The military should get their pay, and the GOP should not be holding the country hostage with maneuvers and tactics that they're doing, trying to get rid of this health care insurance. Many people in our country do need health care insurance, and they should all have what Congress has and what many of the rest of us have, and that's much better access to health insurance. And it does take a few months to get it squared away. There's an open enrollment every year, and it does work, and it works quite well. Thank you, C-SPAN.
C-SPAN chat is the hashtag we're using for the conversation. If you are on Twitter, Tawny is a small government Democrat, native Washingtonian, and the more, she says, D.C. area reps talk, the more I want the government to shut down. Barbara, meanwhile, on the other side, says, thank you, Stenny, for speaking up for my husband, a park ranger, considered non-essential, morale very bad. Elizabethtown, Jerry in North Carolina, he's on the independent line.
Hello.
Hi, Jerry.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing fine, thank you.
Yeah, I'm a retired Marine, and you know, I've been on government health care ever since I was 17 years old when I joined the Marine Corps, and I continue to be on it to this day. And, you know, my personal belief is that affordable, quality health care is not a privilege, it's a right. And you know, what's been missing in all of these debates or these votes in the House of Representatives on the Affordable Health Care Act is what they can do to correct it. All of them have been to defund it or delegitimize the act. What happened to correcting and working together to take care of the American people?
Well, Jerry, what do you think about the Republicans' efforts throughout the past year or so to, in some ways, alter the health care law? There are reports of up to 42 different times, 41, 42, that the House has voted to change, alter, or delay the implementation of the health care law. Jerry, you still there? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm still here, and you know, I was just thinking about your question, but all of their offers have been unreasonable, and I mean, these people need to become reasonable. They need to work for the American people, and this vote that they're taking on funding the military pay currently that's taking place on C-SPAN is nothing more than a political trick.
Well, that was thank you, Jerry. That was the bill they just debated. They'll vote on that actually in a couple of minutes. This is the first of 4 votes. This is on the House amendment to the Senate continuing resolution. This one amendment would repeal the medical device tax. The next vote would be the delay of the implementation of the health care law to January 1st of 2015, and then they will vote on the bill that would ensure that U.S. military personnel are paid in the event of a government shutdown. We continue to take your calls during this first 15-minute vote. We'll take your calls in the next vote as well. 202-585-3885 for Democrats. Republicans, it's 202-585-3886, and for all others, 202-585-3887. Steve is in San Diego. He's on our Democrats line.
Yes, thank you for C-SPAN covering this. I think it's important to point out to the folks who have said that the healthcare system will be destroyed by socialism or communism. What are we talking about? The U.S. healthcare system is 37th currently in the world. We're 39th in infant mortality, 43rd for adult female mortality, 42nd for adult male mortality. This is not a system that's working well. It was patterned after Mitt Romney's program, which is working very well and very well liked. And you know what? It's been litigated enough of trying to stop it. The Republicans could not stop it in a fair way, so now they've tried every trick in the book. Well, the bottom line is, what are they afraid of? They're afraid of it working, of it succeeding. That's what this is about. Have a great night.
Some of the comments on Twitter, C-SPAN chat, Diamond Dave tweets, Representative Kaufman and the GOP are using the military as a pawn. Incredibly tragic. Approve the clean CR, equal problem solved. Arla says, maybe if the government stopped giving welfare to billion-dollar Corps, they could actually help those people who really need it. And Joanne says, so $17 trillion of debt is not economic ruin. American voters are the real dummies. We keep re-electing them. Eastham, Massachusetts, Bob's on the independent line.
Hey, how you doing?
Fine, thank you, sir.
That guy in California doesn't know what he's talking about, because I live in Massachusetts on Romney Care. This state's $4 million in debt thanks to Romney Care. And I got something else to say. I actually think that who gets blamed for the shutdown, if it goes to the Republicans or Democrats, it shouldn't be either one of them. It should be Barack Obama, because in the Constitution, he's supposed to be the one that brings those parties together, and he's bringing them further apart. And it should be under his... you understand what I'm saying?
I got you, Bob. Thanks for your comment. Georgia to...
Well, wait.
Yeah, sure, go ahead. I thought you we're listening. Go ahead.
Can I say something else?
You bet.
I honestly think this thing's a disaster. It's killing jobs. It's like, look at how many people in IBM, UPS, all these jobs, and the 40-hour work week's gone and everything else is gone. I'm telling you, this thing's a disaster ready to happen, and I really think that I don't think the Democrats should be blamed, like I said, and I don't think the Republicans should be the blame. I think it should be the king.
All right, Bob. Thanks for calling in. Both the Republican conference and the Democratic caucus met this evening as members prepared to come to the floor. Speaker Boehner said, quote, "The American people don't want a government shutdown and they don't want Obamacare. That's why later today the House will vote on 2 amendments to the Senate-passed continuing resolution that will keep the government open and stop as much of the president's health care law as possible." Meanwhile, the White House has threatened a veto. Some of the statement from the White House said the Republicans decided they would rather make an ideological point by demanding sabotage of the health care law. Any member of the Republican Party who votes for the bill is voting for a shutdown. It's time for the House to listen to the American people and act, as the Senate has, in a reasonable way to pass a bill that keeps the government running and move on. That's part of the statement released earlier today, the veto statement from the White House. Ardith is in Georgia, Morris, Georgia, on the Republican line.
Yes, sir. I've got a question, but I also want to make comment on the health care.
Okay.
If this shutdown goes through, will people that live, I'm 74 years old, people that depend on Social Security checks, will we still get our money on the 3rd?
I wish I could tell you for sure, but I'm sure that
if it shuts down, you're basically saying we probably won't.
Well, this might be instructive because the veterans, it may be similar to what the veterans are saying. The Veterans Administration, Departments of Veterans Affairs, excuse me, and this is a Washington Post report, told congressional officials on Friday that all benefit checks it issues, including disability claims and pension payments, will be disrupted if a government shutdown lasts more than 2 or 3 weeks, according to congressional sources. So that may be instructive. It may be some sort of similar if there were a government shutdown. Sorry we didn't have a specific answer for you. Here's Hazlet, New Jersey. This is Dino, who's on our Republican line.
Yes, how are you doing? And thank you for taking my phone call.
Mm-hmm.
I have a few comments about this, and one of the questions I really would like to get an answer to, and no one has ever answered this for me, is if Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act is so great, why is it that that Obama, the Vice President, the Congressmen, the Senators, now the congressional staffers are all exempt from it? So what the Republicans are asking for, they're not even asking to get rid of it because we know it's law already. We know that's that. But they're asking for a 1-year delay, just like other people and other groups have gotten. So what's so wrong with asking for a 1-year extension? It seems to me that would be, perfectly okay. When you find that there's a problem with something, you go and you fix it.
Well, that issue may come up when if indeed the Senate rejects the proposed changes that the House is voting on this evening. Robert Costa, who we spoke to earlier of the National Review, wrote that the leadership is mulling, House leadership is mulling several options. At the top of their list is a revised CR that includes the Vitter Amendment, authored by Senator David Vitter of Louisiana. It would eliminate Obamacare subsidies for congressional staffers and members. He writes that leadership thinks that a final CR with Vitter's language would put them on solid political ground, even if Senate Democrats resist. In that scenario, and the government shutdown, Republicans would argue that Democrats shut down the government to protect their perks. The vote's winding down, at least this first one. Let's continue with a call or two more. Norwich, Connecticut. John's on the Democrats line.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah, this is getting ridiculous. This one lady is a Republican saying, will my benefits be affected? She's a Republican, and she wants to know if her disability or Social Security will be affected. One man is calling him the king. It's all about disliking Obama, not what he puts to the table as far as health care for the country. They don't like this man. And I'm a disabled person. I work part-time, and I'm on Medicare and Medicaid, and somehow it will affect me. But the bottom line is the whole purpose of this is to get health care for everyone, and shutting down the government because they dislike Obama is a sin. Thank you.
Stockton, California. Next up, Eric's on the Republican line.
Good afternoon, sir, or I should say good evening.
You bet.
Yeah, well, I actually have 2 points to make. My first point is I think it's an absolute atrocity that we even waste time on arguments of whether we're going to pay our boys or not. As a former Air Force member, I'll tell you what, I did 3 tours, and the last thing our boys should ever worry about, or our men and women should ever worry about, is are they going to receive a paycheck? And the second thing is this: because I sacrificed the better part of my youth to fight the war on terrorism, I'm one of the few who don't have my hand out, who went out and earned their health care, who earned their benefits, who earned their college benefits. And I feel the people who are requesting Obamacare be put into action are the people who want it for free. And at the end of the day, in America, things aren't free. You have to work for them. And that's all I got, sir.
Thank you, Eric. Eric's referencing the bill that's actually the third in the series of votes here. It's the Pay Our Military Act, which would ensure that members of the military are paid in the event of a government shutdown. Let's see if we can get a call or two more to Rosa in Auburn Hills, Michigan, on a Democrat's line.
Good afternoon.
Hi there.
I am really so ashamed of our representatives. I am 74 years old, and I am benefiting from the affordable health care through the donut hole, and my prescriptions have gone down at least $130 per month. In addition to that, I have relatives. I have a degree, and I receive Social Security, but also retirement. I know people are talking about the American people. They don't know the American people. Where I live, Birmingham is a rich city, and I'm north of Birmingham, and they have people there that have relatives that have lost their jobs through corporations, and they're on assistance. And I think that they deserve it because they're not able to work, and they have more money than I have. But the point is, I think that the health care should be off of the table, and we should go on and fund the government. And as far as the military, I think it's a shame for them to attach that to the bill that's being on the table to fund the government. And I think it's just another ploy. And if that affordable health care bill was called anything else, people would love it. And it's a shame. Give it a chance to work. And this is going to be the first time that we will have universal health care. And we ought to stop talking about people wanting something for free.
All right, Rosa, we'll let you go there. If you're on the line, hang on. You're seeing this vote winding down. Just a few left here not voting so far. This is the first. This is the medical device tax vote. The next vote coming up on the amendment, which would delay the implementation of the health care law till January the 15th. So if you're on the line, just hang on. We're going to get back to your calls in the next vote here on C-SPAN and C-SPAN Radio.
On this vote, the yeas are 248, the nays are 174. The first portion of the divided question is adopted. The second portion of the divided question is, will the House concur in the Senate amendment with House Amendment Number 2, printed in House Report 113-238? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Gentleman from Kentucky.
Speaker, on that I ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
And by a vote of 248 to 174, the House approves that First Amendment, the change to the Senate continuing resolution that would repeal the health care law's 2.3% medical device tax. This 5-minute vote is on the delay of the implementation of the health care law to January 1st, 2015. It would also allow companies and insurance providers to opt out of mandated birth control coverage for religious or moral reasons. And also, both amendments would extend the CR. The Senate chopped it back to 2 months. This would extend it back to the 3-month time frame that the House had originally passed a week ago on Friday. Let's get back to your calls on the discussion over federal funding and the health care law. Next up is Quincy, Massachusetts. John's on the independent line.
Hey, good evening. How you doing, pal?
Fine, thanks.
Yeah, listen, you know, my whole thing on this is one guy is responsible for this mayhem that's being caused in this country over this health insurance, and that's John Roberts. I don't know what he was thinking when he voted on this. I don't think any government has any right to demand people to purchase any product, whether it's insurance or a loaf of bread. I mean, I just don't think this whole law is unconstitutional from the get-go. And you know, when you get guys like Harry Reid on there on the soapbox, you know, it's like a couple of little kids in a playground, these back and forth stuff here, and everybody's suffering because of it. But, you know, these Democrats haven't got a clue what they're talking about when it comes to this health insurance, because, you know, it's not going to be able to work, and it's obvious it's not going to be able to work. They just try to jam something down our throats. And, you know, I think a guy like Harry Reid, you know, he needs a backhander. That's what he needs, and sent back into the corner where he belongs, because, you know, the guy just babbles on like a fool, and I'm getting sick and tired of a whole bunch of them here, and I just had it with this country, the way things are going, and it's a shame that, you know, they can't get their heads together and put something on the table here that's going to be good for the entire country. But, you know, it's party against party. It's always going to be that way, and it's not going to change.
Well, we'll see how the Senate reacts when they gavel back in Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern, and that, of course, will be on our companion network, C-SPAN 2. John's in Rhode Island, Warren, Rhode Island, also on the Independence, the others line. Hello.
Hi, my name is Fred. I'm from Warren.
Oh, Fred, I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, and I think that one of the main things that a good civilized country needs is health care for the masses. It's destroying our country, it's bankrupting us, and it's causing a lot of misery. And for people to not even give it a chance, they're being brainwashed from all over the place. I really starting to believe that the Republicans are afraid that it's going to succeed. I mean, it is complicated. I've worked in hospitals for over 35 years in the laboratories, and you know, we don't. It's very, very difficult to figure it out. But it has to be given a chance, and if it's bad, it'll get squashed in the years to come, and the Democrats will be sorry they ever went along with this. So let's give it a chance. It is the law, and I just think that the Republicans are panicking because it's actually going to be given its chance, and we need it.
All right, Fred, here's Bloomfield, New Jersey. John's on the Democrats line.
Hi, good evening. I am a state worker, and I am one of the few unionized workers. To a degree, people have only themselves to blame. They're too cheap or too stupid to join unions. The private sector decimates health care, decimates hours, decimates pension benefits, and people go, oh, we got to go to work anyway. So, you know, the problem with all this are the modern-day robber barons who are American business. If people refuse to accept part-time work, they would have to, you know, the business would eventually have to wise back up. They should not delay this by an hour. You are rewarding the Republicans for absolutely dragging their feet. This should be implemented as is and let, the things fall where they may.
All right, John, thanks for your call and for all your calls. More of them, of course, coming up tomorrow morning, every morning, 7 a.m. Eastern on Washington Journal. One last check of our Facebook poll that's up. Who's responsible for the current fiscal stalemate in Washington? Congressional Democrats, 349 people. Congressional Republicans, 1,213 people casting that vote, and 645 say the White House is responsible for the current fiscal stalemate in Washington. You can cast your vote at facebook.com/C-SPAN. And also, of course, we're continuing the conversation on Twitter. The hashtag is C-SPAN chat.
31, the nays are 192. The second portion of the divided question is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The unfinished business is the vote on H.R. 3210, on which the yeas and nays were ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3210, a bill making